So, Mark, you have spent much of your career in developing innovative approaches to real world evidence and data analytics. Could you explain to us what you think the major issues are that our industry is grappling with today that will change how we both conduct research and utilize real world evidence?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, the regulators are evolving in how they're using real-world evidence, and their stance about how it can inform labeling is changing. Surely we've been using real-world evidence forever for safety in updating the safety part of the label, but we're now seeing it updating the effectiveness part of the label. And although for years FDA has been accepting external control arms from real-world data as part of it, as part of substantial evidence, they now have an example where they have used just real-world evidence as substantial evidence. So recently, the FDA has approved tacrolimus, a Prograf for lung transplant, solely on the basis of real-world evidence. So previously, it had been used in kidney and heart transplant, but it did not have an indication for lung transplantation. So the company submitted data based upon the US Transplant Registry, which concluded all the patients in the US who've had a transplant. And it's a database that the FDA has had experience with and knew it to be accurate and complete. And it showed that it was effective for lung transplant. And that data was then used to provide a new indication. So that's an evidence that they will do this and just use real-world evidence. The question is, what are the lessons learned there? Another example just came recently in China, where Prolia was approved for treatment of osteoporosis. And this was based upon leveraging the randomized controlled trials that had been done around the world, but not in China, and adding real-world evidence from Taiwan and Hong Kong, which showed that they got similar benefits with the same relative risks as you'd expect. And so it was approved for use in China. So both of these examples raise questions about, okay, so is real-world evidence coming of age? Can we use it to support new label indications for treatments? And the answer is yes, with a lot of caveats. We don't have clarity as yet about what data is, when is data good enough to support regulatory decision-making, and when is data fit for purpose for a particular question that is being faced by a regulatory agency. And these will need to be clarified over time. There are some outlines of this that are coming out of draft guidances coming out of the FDA and work products coming out of the EMA as they're putting together their own real-world guidance and how to assess the quality of data. Mm-hmm. Now, second after this is that there is a cultural change going on. And we also know that culture is harder to change than anything else. There's an old expression that culture eats strategy for lunch every day. And there is no doubt that the single most important advance in clinical research in the 20th century was the development of the randomized controlled clinical trial that allow us to impute causation and see if a drug really works. And that's been terrific. Well, everybody who's grown up with that rightly sees that as the gold standard, but they have resisted seeing that there are other ways that you can get good evidence to support effectiveness. And this has to do with a whole new generation of data analysts who have grown up, who are not the old statisticians, and the hope that one day that we'll move from our current system that you only can gain new scientific evidence by doing one-off experiments to a culture where we learn by doing, in which case we would then have a learning healthcare system where we're constantly learning about what works and for whom as care is delivered.
Mark, I
In the
want to jump in
meantime,
there about the learning healthcare system. That's been an area of interest for you for so many years. Why is that not a more accepted way of implementing and delivering healthcare? What is the holdup with that? It's so obvious.
well, it's the amount of regret you're going to have for making a mistake. So when you are making a decision at a patient's bedside for a particular patient, then evidence-based medicine says you use the best available evidence. It doesn't say you use only the best quality evidence. It says you use the best available evidence. And in that case, there have been instances where clinicians and institutions have queried their own databases and gotten information because there was no good published study that told them what to do in a particular case. And in one case like that, they did that and the patient had a good outcome, but the institution warned them not to do that again because if they got a bad outcome, the institution would be held liable. Mm-hmm. So that issue of liability is one which cautions people. The second thing is that if you learn something in real world evidence, it might be true in the population you studied it in. How do you know that it's going to be accurate for other populations? And that gets to the idea that we shouldn't trust any one real world data study or any one real world evidence study. We'd like to see it replicated in different populations by different researchers using different.
That's true for RCTs, right?
That's true for RCTs. So with those caveats, then the idea that we can start trusting real world evidence as we do it really requires a large shift in what we think is good enough evidence. Now, right now we want to have it proven so that when we do it, we feel bulletproof about our recommendations. The other way of thinking about that is with industrial management, and think about continuous quality improvement, that you do something, and if it gets you the answer you want, you're heading in the right direction. If you're not getting the answer that would be helpful, then you have to adjust what you're doing. So that's the way you, over time, make sure that your outputs are increasingly tightly clustered and accurate and what you want. And that idea of an industrial management approach to medicine is not widely acceptable. It's culturally different. In the meantime, I would say what people are starting to default to is they are looking at the development of large, trusted, real-world data sets that have been curated and are administered by governments. So we have Sentinel in the US, and we have Darwin being created in the EU. And because they are being done in a transparent manner, and all the data curation is done in a transparent manner, and you know the source of the data, then there'll be greater trust in the results that come out of these things. However, it really depends on their being fully transparent about what they've done, where the data came from, how they transformed it, how they analyzed it, and have they put it into a causal framework. So the message or the badge that says this is a government sponsored data set is not good enough. They're going to have to lead the way with transparency.